I'm autistic, and when I was 15 years old, my parents had me kidnapped. It was the year of our Lord, 2012, and I was sound asleep in my favorite recliner. I still remember the moment that I woke up. I was lying there on my side and looking out a big window thinking, why is it still dark out? I'd been up very late the night before playing World of Warcraft, and so being woken up in the middle of the night meant that I was as groggy as could be. Anyway, I rolled over onto my back, and the reason that I was awake became apparent. There were two gigantic men, total strangers, posted up on either side of the chair. And when I say that these guys were huge, I mean it. I'm 6'6" now, and I was at least 6 foot then, and they still seemed massive. I was obviously terrified, but that terror was quickly replaced with confusion. After a few rapid and desperate blinks, I saw my parents standing solemnly in the corner of the living room. And once I saw that, I was fearing for my life a little bit less, right? At least I knew that they hadn't broken into the house. But somehow, my confusion felt even worse than the absolute terror that came before it. The way I remember it, my mom was the first one to speak. And as I sat up in the chair, only half awake, she explained, "These men are here to take you to a camp." And in just an instant, my feelings went right back from confusion to fear. And I was absolutely certain that I was having a nightmare. But gentle viewer, I wasn't so lucky. There was no nightmare to be had. I began to ask questions like, where am I going? They told me that the camp was in Utah. I remember asking them how long I have to be there, and they dodged that question a few times in a row. And I also asked the obvious question, why is this happening? Why are you sending me away? And while I don't remember the exact wording, the answer was something along the lines of, we're getting you the help you need. And that probably doesn't make much sense unless you know that I had a really rough time in high school. So let's rewind for a second and talk about how things got so bad that my parents decided to kidnap their one and only son. But first, let me ask you a little question. What do you get when you combine a teenage son with autism and a teenage daughter with cancer? That's right, you get desperate. Incredibly desperate. For those not familiar, it can be absolutely miserable to be and to support a teenager with autism. And while my mom was making some truly heroic efforts to keep my life from falling apart, once my sister got sick, she couldn't keep it up. And I'll be honest, I didn't make it easy on her. I hated school so much that I would just straight up refuse to go. And that was just the start of the problems. There were screaming matches, property destruction, defiance, just overall despair. We were at the brink, and after I made a certain sort of attempt, it became clear that that brink was literal. And once my parents started fearing for my life, well, the die had been cast. That's the Cliff Notes version of why they did what they did. Now, let's get back to the story. My exhausted brain could only come up with one more question for my parents and my kidnappers, and that was, I don't get a choice in this, do I? And I was answered with a single word, a very solemn no. And then I was given the first of the many commands I'd receive over the following years. Stand up very slowly. It was time to go, and I decided to comply. One of those huge strangers grabbed the shirt I had on by the back of the collar. I wasn't going anywhere. And then, with one of them in front of me and one of them behind me, they walked me out the front door of my childhood home. The goons, as they were called, led me out front to a silver Ford Explorer and explained that the child locks were on for the back doors. And I still remember thinking to myself, so it's gonna be like that then, huh? Once I was locked in the back of the SUV, the goons took a second to explain a little bit more about what was going on. I was being taken from my hometown of Fresno, California to a wilderness therapy program in Utah. And the only choice that I had in the matter is whether I did it the easy way or the hard way. The easy way involved me cooperating, being driven to Los Angeles, then flown to Salt Lake City. But if I didn't cooperate, well, it was the hard way. They would handcuff me, gag me, and drive me the entire way to Utah. And because they had my parents' blessing, they had the complete legal authority to do that. And for obvious reasons, I think that all three of us were grateful that I chose the easy way. The drive to LAX was pretty uneventful. I got some more sleep, and we did stop once for me to use the bathroom and grab some snacks. Now, I was allowed privacy in the bathroom, but one of them held the door open with their foot, and the other watched the exterior window. I was still taking it all in, and it took me a second to realize that the reason they did that is so that I wouldn't lock myself in or run away. And that experience got it through my head that my life had just changed completely. But at least the Oreos they bought me tasted good, so that's something. The rest of the trip was about as normal as something this crazy could be. But as we were pulling up to the Los Angeles airport, I did have an idea for how I could resist. What if I caused a fuss at airport security and said I was being kidnapped or something? I decided against doing that for two reasons. One, there's no way they wouldn't have thought of it. And the other thing you've got to ask yourself is, well, what then? Suppose for a second that I did get free. I would be stuck in LA with just the clothes on my back and nowhere to go. It's not like I could call my mom and ask her to take me home, right? So yeah, we got to the airport and one of the two goons peeled off to stay with the car, while the other one joined me on a flight to Salt Lake City. Now the flight went smoothly enough, and when we arrived in Utah, the remaining goon walked me to the curb. And once I was handed off to the employees of a company called Aspiro, my 2.5 months in a wilderness program began. And there is obviously a lot I could say about that, but it is, as they say, a story for another time. And if you're still watching, I would ask that you hit like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. This is yours, as always, Fritz Johnson, signing off.